I had always dreamed of a perfect beach wedding. I mean, who doesn't, right? The soft sound of the waves, the golden sunset in the background, the smell of salt in the air. I imagined walking down the aisle in a white dress, the sand between my toes, with all the people I loved watching me tie the knot. Every detail was carefully planned in my mind for years. I had even set aside a budget, a huge one, to make sure everything was flawless. Over the course of 5 long years, I had saved up a total of $150,000 for this big day. I worked tirelessly, cutting back on unnecessary luxuries and sacrificing my weekends to take extra shifts. There were nights when I'd be sitting up late, counting my savings, watching the numbers grow. I didn't just want a wedding. I wanted the wedding. The kind of celebration you look back on and know it was worth every penny. This was my dream, my moment, and I had poured my heart into making it happen. I had already chosen the perfect venue, a stunning beachside resort, where the sand met the water in a breathtaking view. The guest list was filled with family and friends I loved deeply, and every detail, from the flowers to the music, was meticulously planned. This wasn't just a wedding to me. It was a once-in-a-lifetime event, the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. I wanted everything to be as perfect as it had always been in my mind. But as much as I had my dream wedding in sight, I didn't realize that a storm was brewing just outside my world of beachside bliss. It started subtly. My parents, who I had always been close to, suddenly began acting a little off. Nothing that would make me suspicious at first, but little things here and there began to raise questions. It wasn't just the usual, "How's the wedding planning going?" conversations. No, this time, my mom called me with a sense of urgency in her voice that made me pause. "Sweetheart, I need to talk to you," she said, her tone wavering, almost fragile. "Your father's really sick, and we need your help." The words hit me harder than I expected. My father? Sick? I felt a cold chill run through me. I had just seen him last week, and he seemed fine. He was always the strong, healthy one in the family, the one who never let anything bring him down. To hear that he was suddenly ill, to hear my mom so panicked, was a lot to digest. "What's going on? What happened?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, trying to keep the worry from seeping into my own words. "We just found out that he needs an extremely expensive medication," my mom continued. "It's not covered by insurance, and it's the only thing that can help him right now. We need $115,000 to get it." I felt the ground beneath me shift. My first instinct was to panic. This amount of money was no small thing. Not when it was money I had saved for the wedding. I didn't know what to do. This was my father. The man who had been there for me through every tough time. The man who had sacrificed so much for our family. How could I not help? But at the same time, how could I just give up what I had worked so hard for? "Of course, I'll help," I said before my brain could catch up to my heart. "Just, are you sure this is real? I mean, I've seen Dad, and he hasn't seemed sick at all." "I know, honey," she said quickly, sensing the doubt in my voice. "But the doctors say this medication is critical. Without it, his condition could get worse very quickly." I wouldn't ask if it weren't urgent. The guilt hit me like a ton of bricks. How could I question this? My dad needed this medicine. Of course, I was going to help. Even though it was a massive amount of money, and even though it was for something that wasn't even part of my plan, I didn't want to be the daughter who turned her back on her family when they were in crisis. I knew what it felt like to be the one left out, to not have the support you needed. So, I didn't hesitate. I told my mom I'd help, that I'd get the money. But something in the back of my mind was unsettled. I couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't quite add up. I tried to push the doubt away. My family needed me, and I wasn't about to let them down. I told myself it was fine, that I would find a way to make it all work. But as I went ahead with the transfer, part of me just couldn't stop wondering. Was there more to this than I was being told? Little did I know, the real story was just beginning to unravel. And when I found out the truth, it was far more twisted than I could have imagined. The days following the phone call with my mom felt like a blur. I did everything I could to help. I didn't question the urgency of it all. But as the days went by, something started to nag at me. Something I couldn't quite shake off. When I visited my parents to check on my dad, he seemed fine. Too fine, actually. There was no sign of a serious illness. He was up and moving around, watching TV like nothing had changed. No medical equipment, no signs of hospitalization, nothing that made it seem like he was in critical condition. I tried to brush it off at first. Maybe he was just having a good day, or maybe the medication had already made him feel better. But it didn't sit right with me. If the situation was as dire as my mother had said, why wasn't he in the hospital? Why wasn't he receiving this critical treatment? I asked my mom about it, but she quickly dismissed my concerns. He's doing better, she said, almost too casually. The medicine's working. You don't need to worry about it. But I couldn't stop worrying. I had been so quick to lend them the money, without a second thought. It was a massive amount, one I had worked so hard to save for my wedding. And now it didn't feel like it was being used the way it was supposed to. I had done it because I loved my father, because I didn't want to fail him in his time of need. But this nagging feeling wouldn't go away. One night, I found myself scrolling through social media, trying to distract myself from the growing unease. That's when I saw it. A post from my brother. My brother, Ben, was on a honeymoon. A luxury honeymoon. The photos were everywhere, him and his wife, lounging on a private beach, sipping drinks by the pool. It was like they were living in a dream world. The best part? It was all funded by our parents. I sat there, staring at the photos in disbelief. This wasn't some small trip. No, this was a lavish $125,000 honeymoon. I couldn't believe it. My parents had borrowed $115,000 from me for a medical emergency that wasn't even real, and they were using it to fund my brother's vacation? I felt a cold rage rising in me. How could they do this? How could they lie to me about something so serious? I had been so trusting, so naive, and they had used that trust to fund something as frivolous as a honeymoon. I called my mom immediately. My heart was pounding as I tried to keep my voice steady. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and confusion. "Why is Ben on a $125,000 honeymoon? How is that possible?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Sweetheart, we didn't want to tell you," she said, her voice quiet, almost apologetic. "But Ben's been going through a tough time. He's been depressed, and he really needed a break. We thought it would help him. We didn't want to burden you with it, and we didn't want to make you feel guilty." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Depressed? Was this really the excuse they were using to justify their actions? I had worked so hard for that $150,000, sacrificed so much for my dream wedding, and they had just taken it and given it to my brother for a honeymoon? I had no words. My mind was racing as the anger and betrayal grew inside me. "How could you do this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How could you lie to me? You told me my dad was sick and needed this money, and all along, you were just using it to fund Ben's trip? You lied to me, Mom." "I'm sorry, honey," she said softly, but her words felt hollow. "We just wanted to help Ben. He's been through a lot, and we didn't want to add more stress to your wedding. We didn't think it would matter to you." My chest tightened. She was still justifying it. They had lied to me. They had manipulated me, all in the name of helping my brother. And I had been a fool to believe them. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The truth was right in front of me, and it was uglier than I could have ever imagined. I had been so blinded by my desire to help, to be the good daughter, that I had ignored the warning signs. And now, the money I had saved for my dream wedding was gone, wasted on a lie. I didn't know what to do next. My wedding plans were now in ruins, and my family felt like strangers. I couldn't just sit by and pretend everything was okay. Something had to change. But what could I do? How could I make them understand the depth of my pain and betrayal? How could I make them see that they had taken more than just money? They had taken my trust. In the aftermath of that heart-wrenching revelation, I felt trapped between grief and fury. The wedding I had spent years dreaming about, every detail, every moment, was slipping away because of a lie I never saw coming. With $115,000 of my hard-earned savings lost, I was forced to face the hard reality. My grand beach wedding was now completely out of reach. I couldn't believe it had come to this. I had held onto a vision of a beautiful beachside celebration for so long. White sands, ocean breeze, all the people who mattered to me watching as I said my vows. I wanted that dream with every fiber of my being, but thanks to my parents' betrayal, that dream was just gone. I felt like my own family had robbed me of a once-in-a-lifetime experience, something I would never get back. There were moments I seriously considered taking legal action. I thought about every way I could try to recover what was stolen. But the truth was, I had no proof. All of the money transfers, all the promises, it was all based on trust that now felt foolish and naive. There was no paper trail, no email chain. It was just me, my word against theirs. And even if I did somehow manage to take this to court, I knew it would tear the family apart and likely cost more in the end, both emotionally and financially. But as hurt as I was, the wedding date was approaching, and I had to figure out what to do. My fiancé was there every step of the way, comforting me, supporting me, helping me pick up the pieces of a broken dream. It was his family, though, that truly stepped in and saved the day. When they heard what had happened, their support came in a way I hadn't expected, in a way that felt like genuine kindness and understanding. They couldn't believe the depths of betrayal I had faced, and they wanted to help make things right, at least as much as they could. It was my fiancé's aunt who came up with the idea. She had a beautiful farmhouse tucked away in the countryside, surrounded by rolling fields and endless wildflowers. It wasn't the beach wedding I'd imagined, but when I visited the property, I realized it had a charm all its own. The open air, the serene landscape, and the coziness of it all. It started to feel like maybe this was how it was meant to be. The aunt even offered the venue for free, insisting that it was her way of welcoming me into the family. With this change in plans, I began to picture a smaller, more intimate wedding. I wouldn't have the grand beach scene, the endless guest list, or the elaborate decorations. Instead, I'd have something simpler, a day centered around the people who genuinely cared for me, who were there for me without conditions or expectations. Planning started to feel different. It wasn't about impressing anyone anymore. It wasn't about crafting an Instagram-worthy moment. Now it was about a genuine celebration, a day of love and resilience. My fiancé and I got to work with his family, transforming the farmhouse and surrounding fields into a rustic wonderland. His mother helped with wildflower arrangements, and his siblings hung string lights under the open sky. It was becoming something unique, something personal, and I began to feel a weight lift, as if letting go of the lavish beach wedding was a kind of freedom. And as I spent those days with my fiancé's family, preparing for the wedding with people who truly cared, I realized just how lucky I was to be marrying into this family. They were warm, kind, and had embraced me completely, something I hadn't felt in a long time with my own family. My heart ached for what I had lost, but there was a newfound strength in the simplicity of this wedding. It wasn't grand or extravagant, but it was built on honesty, love, and the kind of family bonds that felt real and lasting. I had given up one dream, but somehow, standing there under the string lights with my future husband, surrounded by fields of wildflowers, I realized I'd gained something far more precious. After everything that had happened, I needed to hear my brother's side of things. Part of me hoped he might see the betrayal for what it was and stand by me, at least as much as any sibling might. I reached out, prepared for a heart-to-heart conversation, hoping he would understand how deeply hurt and blindsided I felt. But instead of empathy or understanding, I was met with something colder, something that felt like yet another twist of the knife. When I confronted him, hoping he might feel a trace of remorse or, at the very least, acknowledge the unfairness of it all, he was shockingly indifferent. He didn't apologize or offer any sympathy. Instead, he stood firm with our parents, almost as if he thought I was overreacting. "Mom and Dad only did what they thought was right," he said, his tone steady and unapologetic. I couldn't believe it. He went on about how much pressure he was under, how stressed he'd been, and how our parents were just trying to support him in his time of need. In that moment, it all became painfully clear. He felt entitled to everything that had happened. He didn't care about the sacrifices I'd made or the dreams I'd put on hold for myself. To him, his comfort was worth more than my trust, my feelings, or even my future wedding. The years of shared childhood memories, the sibling bond we were supposed to have, it all felt meaningless in that instant. I saw that my brother, the one person I thought might stand by me, was complicit in the betrayal. And just like that, the last bit of hope I had for my family shattered. That conversation solidified my decision. I wasn't just dealing with a temporary fallout. This was a fundamental betrayal of trust. With a heavy heart but newfound resolve, I made up my mind. I would go forward with my wedding without them. I wouldn't be inviting my parents or my brother. If they didn't value me enough to respect my dreams, they didn't deserve to be there on one of the most important days of my life. When the day finally arrived, it was everything I could have hoped for and more. The setting was intimate, the atmosphere was filled with love and laughter, and I was surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me. My fiancé and I said our vows under a canopy of string lights and stars, with his family gathered close. My new family, the people who had shown me kindness, support, and unconditional acceptance, stood by my side, making the day feel whole in a way I hadn't expected. I didn't miss my family's presence. Not for a second. In the days following the wedding, I decided to share a few photos on social media. Nothing too extravagant, just some candid shots that captured the joy and warmth of the day. I felt proud of what we'd created and wanted to share a piece of that happiness with friends and family who hadn't been able to attend. But almost immediately, the photos sparked a storm of backlash from my parents and brother. My mother commented almost instantly, hurt and indignation thinly veiled in her words. She was furious that she hadn't been invited, accusing me of being petty and disrespectful. My father chimed in too, and soon they both went on a social media rant about my selfishness and ungratefulness. They painted a picture of themselves as the victims, blindsided by their heartless daughter who had excluded them from such a monumental event. They called me ungrateful, disrespectful, and even went so far as to say that my actions had caused irreparable harm to our family. It stung to see them twist things so publicly, as if I was the one at fault. But instead of feeling ashamed or second-guessing my decision, I felt a strange sense of closure. I saw, right there in their own words, exactly why I had made the choice to exclude them. They were more concerned about appearances and control than they had ever been about my feelings or happiness. As the comments piled up, my heart felt heavy, yet free. I had finally chosen myself over the twisted obligations of family loyalty, and while it was painful, it was also incredibly empowering. The friends and extended family members who truly knew me reached out privately, offering their congratulations and support. They saw through the drama, recognizing that I had finally put my own happiness first. In the end, the wedding was everything I needed, even if it wasn't what I had originally dreamed of. It was a day of love, honesty, and the beginning of a life built on trust and mutual respect. The family I was born into may never understand that, but in that moment, surrounded by my new family, I realized that was okay. In the days after my wedding, the silence from my family was deafening, punctuated only by the rare, stinging barbs they posted on social media. Every word they wrote about me made it clear. They saw themselves as the victims, wronged by my selfishness. My mother went as far as to post a long, dramatic message about how they had sacrificed so much for their children, only to be cruelly cut out of their daughter's life. My brother joined in too, with biting comments, reinforcing that they were blameless, while I was the ungrateful daughter who had crossed a line. To them, I had become the family outcast, the one who dared to challenge their twisted priorities. Seeing those comments hurt more than I wanted to admit. I'd grown up thinking family meant loyalty, understanding, and unconditional love. Yet here I was, with the realization that their loyalty had limits, and that their love came with strings. This wasn't the family I had hoped to celebrate with on my wedding day, and that knowledge hurt deeply. I found myself questioning everything. Was I truly in the wrong for protecting my happiness? Was it really so selfish to want respect and honesty from the people I loved? Despite their anger, though, I knew one thing for sure. My decision had brought a strange, unexpected peace. I had finally chosen myself, something I had never dared to do before. And even though it felt like I was tearing down bridges that could never be rebuilt, I also felt stronger for it. For the first time, I was living my truth, unburdened by the expectations or approval of those who had taken me for granted. But there was still a small ache, a part of me that remembered the good times and felt torn. In the end, though, I realized that protecting my boundaries didn't make me heartless. It just made me someone who had finally learned her worth. I may never have the approval of my parents or the support of my brother, but I had gained something more valuable: freedom to live on my terms, with a family of my own that stood by me, no strings attached.